far away, in a poor cottage on the edge of a remote village, there once lived an old widow and her only daughter, Leah. Leah was as hard-working as she was lovely, for ever since she was a little girl, her mother had taught her everything that she herself knew of the art of good housekeeping. How to grow vegetables, how to clean and polish, how to cook and preserve food, how to sew and spin, how to mend and weave, how to scrub and launder. The two women, one old, one young, were very fond of each other, and although they were so poor, they would have lived in perfect happiness if it had not been for one thing. Their poverty meant that they were always behindhand with their rent. Their landlord was a grasping, avaricious man who made the poor widow's life miserable, especially as his only son had taken a fancy to Leah, and Leah would have nothing to do with him. No matter how quietly they lived, it would seem that this cruel man was determined to cast a blight on everything they did. They were never free of his incessant demands for money, of his rude and arrogant behavior, and of his threats to imprison them. Nor was Leah ever free of his son's unwelcome attentions. These constant threats and abuse eventually wore the widow down. Old and frail as she was, she found at last that life was too much of a burden. And one morning, poor Leah had the sad task of bidding her mother a final and loving farewell. Even at her mother's funeral, Leah found she was not spared the landlord's and his son's demands. The villagers advised her that for her own safety and happiness, she should leave the home in which she was brought up and try and find another home as far away as possible. Leah sadly realized that their advice was wise, and since she had nothing now to keep her in this small village, she packed up all her meager possessions and set off without any further delay. This was a time of sadness for the girl, but nonetheless, she felt her spirits rising as she walked along the unfamiliar path that led deep into the woods. She had never traveled this far before, and she rejoiced in the beauties of nature. The day was warm and pleasant. Birds sang in the trees and flowers bloomed everywhere. She scarcely noticed how quickly the day had worn on until she came upon a tiny, tumble-down cottage, almost hidden in the trees and undergrowth. The cottage seemed so neglected that Leah couldn't believe that anyone lived in it anymore. She thought that it might be a place where she could at least rest for a day or two while she decided what to do next. Cautiously, she opened the door, which creaked loudly in protest, and entered the parlour. What a mess it was in. Chairs and stools overturned, dust everywhere, pots and pans tarnished with grime, and things strewn all over the place. Certainly it seemed as if no one had lived here for a very long time, and even then had never bothered to clean the place. This, however, was no hardship to Leah. She was used to housework and liked to see things tidy and clean. She set to work with a will, putting things back where they belonged, dusting all the surfaces, cleaning the dirty floors, and sweeping away all the grime and the dirt and the cobwebs. How hard she worked. She didn't stop all day. She was so engrossed with the task. I wonder who this house could possibly belong to, she thought. They really weren't house-proud, whoever they were. Why, once it is spick and span, it will be rather a charming house to live in. She was so busy cleaning that she didn't see 3 strange visitors who suddenly appeared and watched her work with great surprise. They were 3 of the fairies who lived in the house, and the reason why it was so dirty was because they were giddy, vain creatures who cared for nothing but parties and dancing. Without another thought, the fairies surrounded the startled girl, making her twirl and pirouette round and round, faster and faster. Suddenly, one of them cried, "Come out, King Lemire!" Leah found herself in a beautiful palace where a handsome young man stood surrounded by the dancing fairies. The king then caught a glimpse of Leah and saw that she was a mortal like himself. Breaking free of the fairy's grasp, he took her hand and slowly turned her around once, twice. Leah found herself back in the cottage, all alone. She was greatly intrigued by the strange sight she had seen and was determined to find out more. So, remembering the fairy's magic words and actions, she turned herself around, crying aloud, "Come out, King Lemire!" There she was, back in the gorgeous palace once more. The moment King Lemire saw that she was back, he broke away from his tormentors and hurried Leah out onto the balcony where the fairies could not follow them because their magic had no power in the open air. The king told Leah that when he had first succeeded the throne, he had loved dancing and feasting so much that he had neglected to rule his country. Worse, the fairies thought that they had found someone who would always dance and feast with them, and had cast a spell on him to make him do just that. The only person who can break the spell is their mother, he told Leah, and she lives beyond the peak of the highest mountain, beyond the last tree of the furthest forest, beyond the source of the widest river, and she can only be found by traveling 7 days and 7 nights. If she can be found, King Lemire, replied Leah, and is willing to break her wicked spell, then I shall go in search for her. Leah realized she had no time to lose if she were to break the enchantment that bound King Lemire. She would have to find the fairy's mother as quickly as she could. Pausing only to take her small bundle of food, Leah set off on her strange quest, looking for the last tree of the furthest forest, climbing beyond the peak of the highest mountain. very difficult, and Leah often felt desperately tired. But she still travelled on and on, until she came to and crossed the widest river. She travelled for 7 days and 7 nights, barely pausing to rest and eat, until at last she came to a strange-looking cottage, with pens imprisoning small wild creatures in its courtyard. This cottage was every bit as untidy as the fairies had been, and Leah, not wishing even to rest in such dirt, decided that she should first clean and tidy the place for the person who lived there. Obviously, making spells is tiring work, she thought to herself. If this is the home of the mother of the fairies, she probably doesn't have time for housework, poor woman. Well, I'm used to it, so I'll clean for her. She set to with a will, airing the bedding, sweeping the floor, cleaning the pots and pans. She was enchanted with the wild creatures who seemed to make this place their home, and as her hard work had given her quite an appetite, she thought the fairy's mother wouldn't mind if she had a little bit to eat, and if she shared her meal with some of the four-legged guests. The fairy's mother arrived at her home as unexpectedly as her daughters had. She was at first not at all pleased to see this strange young woman make free with her home. "What brought you here?" she abruptly demanded. Leah was startled and more than a little frightened by the strange woman who confronted her so angrily. "Good thoughts," Leah replied. "I have been taught to help people and would like to help you if you wish it." The fairy's mother continued to ask Leah questions one after another. Leah answered each one cleverly and honestly. Gradually, the fairy became less and less frightening. When finally she heard why Leah had come, she confessed that she had no control over her daughters, and the only person who could break King Lear's enchantment was the fairy's grandmother. To reach her, Leah would have to make another difficult journey lasting 7 days and 7 nights. A long and difficult path to follow. "I will go to her," Leah said. "Such a journey holds no fears for me." The fairy's mother took her to the threshold and pointed across the mountains. "You found the journey here difficult because the terrain was difficult," she told Leah. "The way to my mother's will be difficult too, because it is so easy. You will be beguiled by many strange and pleasant sights. But do not let them turn you from your path, but walk on for 7 days and 7 nights until you come to my mother's house." She sent Leah on her way with a fine bundle of food and clothing to sustain her, and a good luck spell to follow and protect her. was as the fairy's mother said. Leah found herself walking through pleasant, sweet-smelling meadows, through gentle woodlands, by softly flowing streams. She passed by fine palaces and saw many strange and interesting sights, but remained true to the fairy's advice and didn't let any of these beguile her. She carried on steadfastly for 7 days and 7 nights without turning aside once. At last, right on the edge of a wood, she came upon a little hut, which was as tumble-down as any of the fairies' homes she had seen. This must belong to the fairy's grandmother, she thought, for she had become used to the fairies' ways by now, and crept through the front door. It was certainly as gloomy as the other cottages, and just as untidy, but whereas they had seemed derelict, this cottage was strewn with the most beautiful gowns made of the richest fabrics, and as much jewellery as anyone could imagine, just scattered helter-skelter. Leah had never seen such finery in all her life, and she couldn't resist touching the delicate material and trying on some of the jewellery. She was so engrossed with this pleasant task that she didn't see the fairy's grandmother arrive in the usual fairy way. Unlike the others, the old fairy greeted her kindly. "What is the sweetest yet the most bitter thing in the world?" "The tongue of man," Leah replied. "And who is the richest man in the world?" "The one who works the hardest, because riches can always be increased." "And what can run faster than anything else?" "Man's thoughts," Leah responded. "You have answered correctly," the fairy cried, "and I shall make the spell to break the enchantment holding poor King Lemire. But, my dear, I shall need certain rare plants which are difficult to find." Once again, Leah had to set off on her travels. She had to pick plants that only grew on the mountainside. She had to find leaves with the morning's dew still fresh on them. She had to find flowers that were full-blown, roots of plants that only grew by certain streams. But at last she had gathered together all the rare plants that the grandmother of the fairies had specified. She was able to return to the little hut with a light heart. The grandmother of the fairies kept her part of the bargain. She set to make up the complicated spell that would break the enchantment her naughty granddaughters had placed on King Lemire. She ground the roots, infused the leaves, boiled the flowers. It was certainly a difficult spell. "And it's not one I make very often," she confided to Leah, "but I don't believe I have lost my skills." As a parting present, she gave Leah the most beautiful velvet robe that had magical powers. She also gave her a box which contained her spell to free King Lemire. Leah twirled once, then twice, and there she was, back in the fairy's cottage where it had all begun. She cried out, "Come out, King Lemire," and twirled again once, twice, and found herself back on the balcony of the king's palace. And there was King Lemire himself, staring sadly at the distant mountain tops, wondering where Leah was. He was so lost in contemplation that he thought the new apparition was just another fairy, until Leah removed her cloak and called to him softly. "I have your spell, King Lemire," she told him. "The enchantment that binds you can now be broken forever." And broken it was. The king was overjoyed, not only because he was once more a free man whom the fairies could never again enslave, but also because he and Leah could now get married. The wedding was a truly wondrous occasion, with feasting and dancing, but King Lemire solemnly promised Leah that he had now learnt his lesson and would never again neglect his people for his own pleasure.